My name is Melissa Rowan. I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how my husband stole everything I'd built, my work, my trust, my sacrifices, to help another woman rise. And how I took it all back, one receipt, one file, one truth at a time. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I once made anniversary dinners and heated up late-night tea while he said he was working late. I was scrubbing tomato sauce off my sleeve when I heard the water running upstairs. Ethan had just jumped into the shower, casually leaving his phone on the counter. It buzzed 3 times. I wouldn't have looked. But it was right there. And the screen lit up with a message that stopped me cold. Can't wait to celebrate your big win tonight. Same place, 8 p.m. I'll tell her I'm stuck at work again. I froze. My hands still dripping from the sink, heart thudding so hard I could barely hear the water running anymore. My eyes scanned the sender's name, Alan from accounting. That made no sense. Alan? The older, awkward man with thick glasses I'd met twice at Ethan's office parties? Alan barely made eye contact with people. I knew he wouldn't be sending flirty messages to anyone, let alone Ethan. So I opened the thread. And that's when everything shattered. The texts were intimate. Detailed. Affectionate. Possessive. The kind of messages you send someone when you don't just want their body, you want their loyalty. But they weren't coming from Alan. They were coming from Madison. Madison Blake. Blonde curls. Mid-30s. Bright smile that masked a fox's cunning. She worked in the accounting department and once stood far too close to Ethan at the year-end gala. Back then, I thought nothing of it, even when I smelled perfume on his shirt collar. I remember thinking maybe he'd walked through a department store. I zoomed in on the contact picture. A blurry selfie. Half a face. Yellow light in the background. But unmistakably her. My stomach twisted into something raw and bitter. I felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion and couldn't look away. All the signs I'd brushed off suddenly became neon red warnings. The extra late nights, the client dinners, the tension in his voice when I asked to stop trying for a baby after our 3rd failed IVF cycle. I had blamed myself for everything. My body. My mood swings. My inability to give him a child. Now I realized the real burden in our marriage wasn't infertility. It was betrayal. I placed the phone exactly where I found it. Carefully. Like it was a live grenade. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there as the drizzle tapped the windows of our Seattle condo. The quiet was unbearable. Then I heard his steps. Calm. Casual. He came down in a crisp button-up shirt, tie halfway done. He looked like the man I had fallen in love with 10 years ago, before he hollowed out our vows. Have you seen my wallet? He asked, adjusting his cufflinks. I smiled, even as my mouth tasted like metal. Today's the Henderson presentation, right? He paused. Just for a beat. Just long enough to confirm everything. Yeah. I told you I might run late, he replied. Don't wait up. His smile was easy. Rehearsed. The kind of smile a man wears when he thinks he's smarter than you. And I smiled back. Like a woman who had nothing to hide, but everything to take back. The moment the door closed, I opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out my old work phone. The one from my days as a legal advisor in insurance compliance, before Ethan gently, then insistently, suggested I pause my career to focus on us. I had taken that suggestion as love. I was wrong. I powered up the phone. Dug through his emails. Screenshotted the texts. Pulled up reservation histories for Valente's, the Italian restaurant where we once had our 2nd anniversary, now repurposed as his Mistress celebration spot. Every digital trace told the same story. While I cooked and bled and waited for hope to stick, he was dining by candlelight with Madison, feeding her my ideas. Literally. Because the biggest blow wasn't the affair. It was that he stole my work, the strategic proposal I wrote over late-night tea and spreadsheets on our kitchen table, and used it to get Madison promoted. He had taken my words, changed the name, and handed it to her like a trophy. A woman who had never stepped foot in a legal review meeting, now being toasted as the rising visionary of Meridian Creative. It wasn't a love triangle. It was identity theft. And I wasn't going to scream. Or break plates. Or text him back in a flood of curses. No. I knew better. Revenge isn't loud. Revenge is precise. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote. I organized. I built a file. One page at a time. Just like I'd once built his career while silently dismantling mine. By 10 the next morning, I had an appointment with Meridian's executive office. I introduced myself as Bella Martinez, former legal counsel. Calm. Clinical. No mention of Ethan. No mention of Madison. Just a woman calling about internal misconduct regarding misappropriated intellectual property. When the man on the other line, Richard Levine, Senior Executive Director, asked to see me in person, I already had a folder ready. Tabs marked. Timelines sorted. Slides printed. The truth sharpened into a scalpel. I wasn't trying to win my husband back. I was going to reclaim every piece of myself that he buried under lies. Richard Levine's office was on the 27th floor of a sleek, glass-paneled tower in downtown Portland. I remembered the building well. I had stood inside it 3 years ago during a company holiday gala, invisible among the wives in sparkly dresses, sipping champagne while Ethan and his team raised a toast to a project I had helped build, without my name attached to any of it. Now, I wasn't here as anyone's plus one. I was here as the storm. I walked in wearing a navy sheath dress, minimal jewelry, and low heels. Clean. Polished. Professional. My hair tied back. No emotion in my face. The receptionist looked up from her desk and smiled politely. I gave her my name, and within minutes, I was ushered in. Richard didn't waste time with pleasantries. He stood when I entered but didn't offer small talk. Just a nod and a gesture to the chair across from him. Late 50s, salt and pepper hair, a reputation in the city for not suffering fools. Miss Martinez, he said. I understand you have something that concerns one of our employees. I opened my laptop, connected the HDMI cable, and let the first slide appear on the massive screen across from us. Strategic Proposal, Project Denver, Authorship Trail. For the next 10 minutes, I laid it out. The document drafts, time-stamped. The emails between Ethan and me, proof I had crafted the original framework. Side-by-side comparisons of my final draft and the version submitted by Madison Blake. Even the metadata matched. Every font. Every indent. Every misplaced comma I hadn't fixed in the rush of exhaustion after pulling an all-nighter to finish it. Richard leaned back, arms crossed, silent. I didn't come here as a wife, I said plainly. I came here because this company just promoted someone using a plagiarized document that carries legal and ethical consequences. And the man who helped her do it? Is managing millions in project funds with no oversight. He looked at me for a long time. Not questioning. Assessing. I'll need to verify this, he said. I expect you will, I replied. And you'll find everything holds. I used to work in legal compliance. I know exactly how these things fall apart when ignored. Richard leaned forward. Can you come back at 3? I nodded. Gladly. As I left the office, I passed Madison near the elevators. She didn't notice me. She was laughing with a group of colleagues, a cobalt blue dress hugging her frame, latte in hand, walking like a woman whose life was blooming. But I saw everything. The shine in her eyes. The confidence in her step. The illusion she'd built from the bricks I laid. And I knew it was all about to crumble. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't fall apart. I sat in our dark kitchen, the one I had scrubbed clean while he texted her from the same seat, and opened my laptop. Drafted email to HR, internal compliance, and the office of the executive director. Attached every piece of evidence. Every message. Every timestamp. Every receipt. I added one final name to the CC field, Richard Levine. I didn't click send. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. Instead, I booked a reservation at Valente's for that evening. The same Italian place where Ethan took Madison every few weeks, where their secret meetings blended into candlelight and wine. I arrived 5 minutes early. Black dress. High collar. Sleeves down. Not seductive, calculated. This wasn't revenge. This was reckoning. Then Richard entered. No greeting. No hesitation. Just a brisk nod. Ready? We walked in together. Like professionals attending a strategic dinner. The hostess straightened the moment she recognized him. This way, Mr. Levine. And there they were, Ethan and Madison, seated near the window, candlelight glowing softly between them. Ethan leaned toward her, his hand resting lightly on hers. The necklace around her throat shimmered, Tiffany. I recognized the receipt from our credit card statement. He said it was a birthday gift for his mother. They were laughing. At what, I didn't care. Because nothing was funny about what came next. Richard's voice rang out, sharp and public, "Is that Ethan Martinez?" The entire restaurant hushed. Ethan's head whipped around. His eyes locked on mine. And I saw it, pure, unfiltered panic. Not confusion. Not guilt. Fear. The kind that comes when the past walks in wearing high heels and a steel smile. "Good evening, Ethan," I said sweetly. "Madison, you're looking radiant. Quite the celebration tonight, huh?" Madison's face went pale. Her hand snapped back. What are you doing here?" "Having dinner," I replied coolly. "Just like you." I turned to Richard. "Mr. Levine, allow me to introduce Madison Blake. Promoted recently, if I'm not mistaken, based on a proposal I believe we've both reviewed in detail." The blood drained from Madison's face. Ethan stood up. "Bella, this isn't the time or place," he hissed. "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because it seems like the perfect place to remind you, this same table, same wine, same night of last week, while I sat at home with our anniversary dinner waiting cold. Ring any bells?" His mouth opened, then closed. I pulled up my phone. Tapped. A photo of Madison clinking glasses with Ethan, time-stamped and geotagged from Valente's Instagram page last Tuesday. I swiped again. Dinner reservation under Ethan M., 10 days ago. Same night you said you were stuck in meetings. I turned to Richard. He didn't even bother changing the venue. Or the lies. Madison tried to speak, but no sound came. Just shallow breaths and trembling fingers gripping her napkin. "I thought you were smarter than this, Ethan," I said softly. "But you made it easy. The messages. The plagiarized proposal. Even the phrasing you borrowed from me for your last 3 reports. Sloppy." Richard didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence of a man who now knows he was deceived is louder than any gavel. "Shall we?" I asked, already turning to leave. Ethan's voice followed me. "We can talk at home." I paused. Looked over my shoulder. "We will. But not for reconciliation. For audit prep." And I walked out. The door shut behind me. No more waiting for him to come home. No more excuses. No more shadows. I was done being the ghostwriter. Now, I was the story. I returned home that night to a dark, quiet house, just as I had so many nights before. But this time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt ready. I turned on the kitchen lights, sat at the table Ethan had once cluttered with spreadsheets and espresso cups, and waited. Not as a wife. Not as a victim. But as someone holding the kind of power that only comes when the truth is fully in your hands. He walked through the door at 10:14 p.m. Blazer wrinkled. Tie loosened. Eyes wide like a man who had woken up too late to stop a flood. "Melissa," he said, softly. The same voice he'd used when he forgot our anniversary. When he cancelled my embryo transfer appointment with a casual "babe," something came up. I didn't rise. "Sit." He sat, avoiding eye contact, like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. The air between us was thick. But not with pain. With silence. The kind that follows an explosion. "What do you want me to say?" he asked after a moment. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out the first document. "This is our savings account statement. Last year, you withdrew $12,000. You told me it was for a real estate platform you were investing in with Sam." Ethan blinked. I slid the second paper toward him. "Here's a wire transfer. Same date. Same amount. Recipient, Madison Blake." His shoulders dropped. I kept going. "Want to explain why the deposit on her new apartment came from our joint savings?" His lips parted, but no sound followed. "I called the fertility clinic, too," I continued. "You requested the cancellation of my ovulation support. Without telling me. Without telling me while I thought I was failing us. While I blamed myself for every negative test." He finally looked at me. "Melissa, You sabotaged it. You sabotaged me. 3 rounds of IVF. And I was alone in every one of them." "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, voice small. "But you did," I said, rising now, voice steady. "Not just by cheating. Not just by stealing my work. But by making me question my worth. By making me feel like I was the problem. Like my ambition, my body, my time, were inconveniences." He reached across the table. "Please." I stepped back. "Don't." He lowered his hand. "You told me not to go back to work because it would make you feel like a burden. You didn't want to be the man whose wife out-earned him. And when I believed you, when I gave up everything to support you, you used that silence to build a second life." Tears welled up in his eyes. For once, they were real. But it didn't matter anymore. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Let me make this right." I shook my head. "No, Ethan. You don't get to make this right. Because this wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. You planned this. You benefited from it. And now you're only sorry because I'm no longer the quiet woman making dinner while you text another woman across the table." He sat there, speechless. But I wasn't done. I spent the next 2 weeks pretending. Smiling through therapy sessions he insisted we try. Playing the dutiful wife while quietly building the case of a lifetime. At night, I was a shadow in my own home. Sifting through years of shared files, pulling archived tax returns, digging through secondary accounts he had labeled retirement investments. But they weren't for retirement. They were stolen funds. Ethan had rerouted over $40,000 from Meridian's Denver project into a personal account, later used to pay for Madison's leadership coaching retreats, her rent, and even designer bags listed on expense reports as client appreciation. I didn't work alone. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Jenna Quinn. A rival from law school turned partner at a forensic litigation firm in Seattle. When I laid out the case, she leaned back and simply said, "You want him broken, or just bleeding?" "I want him exposed," I answered. Not out of anger. Out of principle. This isn't about heartbreak anymore. It's about integrity. Jenna nodded. Then we'll go all the way. Her team worked fast. They verified every paper trail, every false invoice, every file Ethan had carelessly forgotten to scrub. But the real shock came when a message popped up in my LinkedIn inbox. You don't know me, but I know about Ethan and Madison. If you're willing to listen, I have something you need. At first, I assumed it was a scam. But I checked the profile. Real person. Lena Morris. 24. Former admin assistant to Madison. She had left Meridian 3 months prior with no explanation. I met her at a quiet cafe on Alberta Street. Petite, nervous, eyes darting around like someone still afraid of shadows. She handed me a silver USB. I saved everything Madison asked me to, she said. She said it was insurance, just in case. I think she was going to use it to control Ethan if things went south. But once I realized who you were, I couldn't stay quiet. What's on it? I asked, voice tight. Private recordings, she said. From their meetings. From his office. Her apartment. Him talking about your drafts. Laughing about how you trusted him. How you didn't need credit because you were a housewife now. I stared at the flash drive in my palm. It weighed nothing, but felt like it could drop a skyscraper. Why are you doing this? I asked. Lena's voice cracked. Because she did the same thing to me. Stole my notes. Took my ideas. Claimed she mentored me when she just used me. And, because I've seen what it does to people like you. People who give everything and get erased. I took her hand. You didn't just help me, I said. You helped yourself. And you just helped bring 2 frauds down. That night, I listened to the recordings. Ethan's voice was clear, smug, Bella's good. But she always does the right thing. The kind of person who believes merit will be enough. That doesn't always get rewarded. And Madison's giggle followed. Think she'll find out? No, Ethan replied. She still trusts me completely. I stared at the screen, hand trembling, not from heartbreak, but from resolve. They didn't just use me. They mocked me. I closed the laptop. Sent one final email to Richard Levine. Subject, internal misconduct and financial fraud, request for pre-board review. Attached, the final evidence file. Ethan didn't know it, but by the time Monday came, he wouldn't just be exposed. He would be professionally incinerated. The morning of the board meeting, the sky over Portland was a moody steel gray, the kind that threatened rain but held its breath. I arrived at Meridian Creative's headquarters at exactly 8:45 a.m., a gray folder tucked neatly under my arm, my heels clicking in rhythm with every step I took. This time, I didn't hesitate at the lobby. I didn't have to ask for directions. I didn't wait for permission. Richard Levine was already standing by the elevator, his expression unreadable. He gave me a short nod as I stepped in beside him. We said nothing on the way up. We didn't need to. The elevator doors opened to the 19th floor, the boardroom level. Everything was ready. The polished oak door loomed ahead, sealed like the vault of a courtroom. Behind it sat 8 people, 6 men, 2 women, who controlled millions in funding, dozens of careers, and Meridian's entire corporate reputation. And today, they would learn the truth. At exactly 9 a.m., Richard opened the door. Inside, the room was quiet. No chatter. No movement. Just the weight of expectation. Ethan was already there, seated, suited, reviewing a set of papers with a forced calm. His face didn't register surprise when he saw me. Not immediately. But his eyes flicked to Richard, then to the folder in my hand, then back to me. And I saw it. That same look from Belente's. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. Madison entered the room less than a minute later. Designer handbag. Flawless makeup. but her shoulders were tense. She didn't meet anyone's eyes as she took her seat near the end of the table. Richard cleared his throat. Let's begin. I didn't sit. I walked to the head of the table, placed the silver USB drive in front of the projector, and looked every board member in the eye. My name is Melissa Rowan, I began. Some of you may know me as Ethan Martinez's wife. But today, I'm not here in a personal capacity. I'm here as a former legal advisor with a specialization in corporate fraud and financial compliance. No one interrupted. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. A breakdown of the Denver project's 6-month budget, followed by a trail of suspicious transfers totaling over $41,000 rerouted to a secondary account under Ethan's name. Then, a scanned receipt showing the money being paid to a real estate firm in Vancouver. For those unfamiliar, I said calmly, that was the deposit on an apartment where Madison Blake currently resides. Gasps weren't audible, but the stillness that followed was. This expense lacked internal disclosure, was never approved by finance, and was mislabeled as expanded marketing on an internal memo Ethan authored himself. Board member Robert Kern raised a hand. Can you prove the funds were directly tied to a company project? I advanced the slide again. Receipts. Account transfers. Metadata timestamps. And finally, an email from Ethan to an unnamed accountant. Temporarily file it under expanded marketing. I'll adjust once we formalize it. A long silence followed. Then I spoke again. That's not the only issue. Next slide. 2 documents side by side. The original strategic draft from my personal email, sent to Ethan 10 months ago. And Madison Blake's promotion-winning proposal, submitted last quarter. Same layout. Same graphs. Same phrasing. Verbatim. Even the header formatting was identical. Madison Blake's promotion was based on plagiarized content, I said. Content I authored, edited, and shared only with Ethan Martinez. Content that was not public, not archived, and not authorized for submission under anyone else's name. The murmurs started then, board members shifting in their seats, exchanging glances. And, I added, to eliminate any doubt, I'd like to play an internal audio recording, gathered legally from company equipment under Meridian server policy. I clicked play. Ethan's voice came through, clear and smug. Bella wrote that part. She's good, but she's not a cultural fit. Madison presents it more digestibly. Then Madison's voice followed. Think Bella will find out? No way. She's too busy managing house stuff. The words fell like hammers. The silence after was deafening. Madison shot to her feet. These are private recordings. You can't use them. Richard stepped in. Company-owned equipment. Stored on company servers. Per policy, it belongs to Meridian. Especially when tied to misconduct. No one objected. I looked directly at the board. This isn't just plagiarism. This is abuse of company resources. This is financial misconduct. This is systemic manipulation using the illusion of loyalty to mask fraud. Board member Karen Hollis, the COO, turned to Richard. Your recommendation? Richard's voice was steady. Immediate termination of both employees. Full reimbursement of misused funds. Submission of all documentation to the Oregon Department of Revenue and State Auditor's Office. Another board member added, seconded. Then another. And another. It was unanimous. Ethan stood, hands raised, voice panicked. This is a misunderstanding. I brought in the highest revenue this quarter. You can't fire me. Karen looked at him, stone-faced. You're also the reason we now face a potential federal audit. Security entered quietly. Ethan's eyes snapped to mine. Melissa. Please. Everything I did, it was for us. I looked at him without blinking. No. You did it for yourself. You built a castle out of my bones. And now it's collapsing. Madison was already packing her bag, her hands shaking. Her lipstick suddenly looked too bright. Her earrings too loud. Everything about her now rang hollow. She didn't look at me. Not once. She didn't have to. Because she knew. She would never recover from this. I signed the final document on the table, an acknowledgement of the formal grievance and its resolution. Melissa Rowan. When I walked out, I didn't look back. There were no tears. No raised voices. Just the quiet, satisfying echo of justice. The day the boardroom doors shut behind me, I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I didn't even feel triumph. What I felt was something deeper, something quieter. Closure. I stepped into the elevator, rode it to the lobby in silence, and walked out onto the street like a woman shedding the last of someone else's skin. The Portland sky had begun to clear, soft streaks of sunlight cutting through the clouds. It felt poetic. But I didn't romanticize it. This wasn't the ending of a love story. It was the final chapter of a lie. The divorce happened fast. Jenna filed everything within 2 days of the board hearing. Ethan didn't contest. Not because he was cooperative, but because he was too stunned, too cornered, too publicly disgraced to fight back. His name had become a whispered cautionary tale among former colleagues. Madison was gone. Her resignation was submitted via email, and she was never seen at another Meridian event again. A rumor reached me through Jenna's network. Madison had tried applying to a firm in Arizona, but the internal ethics memo Richard had sent out effectively blacklisted her. Ethan was stripped of his title and barred from handling company finances in any professional capacity. And the cherry on top? Meridian's legal team filed a civil suit against both of them for restitution. The sum? $48,300. Almost poetic. Jenna called me 2 days before the final divorce signing. He's willing to give up the condo, the second car, and his stake in the investment account if you waive alimony, she said. You could push for more. A lot more. I don't want more, I told her. She hesitated. Melissa, are you sure? You earned that. I know, I said calmly. But I don't want a single dollar tied to his name. I don't want his money funding my future. I signed the papers the next morning. Simple. Unadorned. Just ink on a page severing a decade of sacrifice. And when it was done, I walked into my new apartment, a small, sunlit third-floor unit in a quieter part of town, and set down the single box of things I'd brought with me. It wasn't much. A few books. Some kitchenware. A lavender plant. And a file folder labeled, My Truth. That night, I made dinner for one. I poured myself a glass of wine. I played soft jazz on the speaker, not because I was trying to recreate the romance Ethan had burned to ashes, but because the music felt like something that belonged to me. There were moments I thought about him. Of course there were. The nights he made tea for me during my recovery from the second embryo transfer. The way he'd once stroked my hand under the table while I cried over yet another rejection from a publishing firm. The way he'd looked at me when I first told him I was pregnant, for 2 short weeks, before I lost it. But those were fragments. And fragments don't make a person whole. What came after was worse, the subtle manipulation. The emotional distancing. The way he'd talk over me in public, saying, Melissa tends to overthink these things, like my mind was a burden. I remembered that version of Ethan more vividly now. The one who sabotaged my fertility medication while smiling at me from across the dinner table. The one who used my writing, my late-night edits, my bullet-pointed brilliance, and handed it to a woman in heels and perfume while I sat home calculating embryo windows. He didn't just break a vow. He rewrote my story without permission. Until I took the pen back. 1 week after the divorce, I got a call from Karen Hollis. "You have a moment to meet someone," she asked. "Depends who." "Helen McAdams. You made quite the impression at the board meeting." I met Helen that Friday in a small cafe in Goose Hollow. She was sharp, mid-60s, with silver hair pinned back and eyes that missed nothing. She stirred her coffee once, then said, "My ex-husband used to talk about you. Said you were one of the brightest legal minds he'd ever taught." I blinked. I didn't know he spoke about me. He did. "But you disappeared from the scene. He assumed you went corporate. Turns out, you went domestic." I smiled. "For a while, yes." She nodded, not judging. Just understanding. "I made the same mistake once. Thinking I had to choose between power and love." She slid a business card across the table. "McAdams and Wren, Legal Advisory and Ethics Reform Division. We're building something. Post-crisis advisory for companies trying to rebuild after internal failures. I need someone who doesn't just know the law, but knows how it breaks from the inside." I stared at the card. She didn't pressure me. She didn't pitch. She just said, "I think you've lived through enough to help others stop it before it starts." I accepted. Not because I needed to climb the ladder again, but because for the first time, I wasn't climbing anyone else's. That same night, as I unpacked the last of my books onto the shelves of my new living room, my phone buzzed. A message. "Ethan. I know I was wrong. I think about you every day. If there's any part of you that still loves me, please give me a chance to fix this." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button. But there was nothing left to say. Because love without trust is just a performance. And I had stopped performing. I turned the phone over, silenced it, and poured myself a second glass of wine. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was simply free. It's strange how healing doesn't feel like fireworks or confetti. It feels like sitting in a quiet apartment, reading a contract you actually want to sign. It feels like waking up without dread in your chest. It feels like brewing your own coffee the way you like it, strong, barely sweet, no compromises. 3 weeks after I joined McAdams and Run, I found myself immersed in work that didn't just challenge me, it restored me. The office wasn't flashy. No marble floors, no glass elevators. But the people were sharp, direct, and most importantly, honest. No egos playing house with each other's reputations. Just integrity. My first project was an internal audit for a mid-size marketing firm that had suffered a whistleblower crisis. The moment I stepped into the strategy meeting, I realized something profound. No one there knew me as Ethan's ex-wife. They only knew me as Melissa Rowan, the woman Karen and Helen trusted. I wasn't tethered to someone else's legacy anymore. I was building my own. 6 months flew by. Contracts reviewed. Cases closed. Truths brought to light. Colleagues began sending me messages like, "Could you take a look at this clause? You catch things we miss, or your notes saved that meeting. Thanks again." Recognition. But the kind I had earned, not begged for. One day, during a late lunch break, I received a message from Lena, the young woman who'd given me the USB that tipped everything. She wanted to meet for coffee. We chose a small vegan cafe in the Hawthorne district. Lena arrived wearing a soft denim jacket, a warm smile replacing the anxiety she once carried. "I got the job," she said, eyes shining. "At the nonprofit. The one that helps women leave toxic workplaces. They said my references and courage were impressive." "You are impressive," I told her. "You didn't just help me. You helped yourself." She leaned in a little, voice quiet but certain. "You know, for a long time I thought I was just someone people walked over. But when I gave you that flash drive, when I saw what you did with it, I realized maybe my voice could matter." I lifted my glass. To voices that finally get heard. We clinked lightly, and I left that cafe feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, grounded, scarred but steady hope. And I began writing again. Not to be published. Not for Ethan. Not for applause. Just for me. Each night, I filled a page or two. Things I'd learned. Things I never wanted to forget. Things I was still healing. I wrote about how betrayal doesn't always wear a villain's mask. Sometimes, it wears a wedding ring and calls you babe while poisoning your dreams. I wrote about how manipulation isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a slow erosion of your worth, coated in compliments. I wrote about resilience, and how it isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking, rebuilding, and refusing to stay shattered. One evening, while curled up on the armchair by my window, I glanced down at the river winding through the city. The golden hue of sunset reflected off the glass buildings, the same ones I used to look up at while wondering if I'd ever get a second chance. Now I looked down from one of them. I received another message from Ethan a few days later. This time, it was longer. It's been 6 months. I still think about you every day. I know I don't deserve it, but I wish we could talk. Just once. I still love you, Melissa. I don't know who I am without you. That last line used to gut me. Not anymore. Because I knew exactly who I was without him. I was a woman who no longer cooked cold dinners for someone who'd never show up. I was a woman who no longer apologized for her ambition. I was a woman who no longer accepted silence in place of respect. So I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. But because the chapter was closed. And my story had moved on. Later that week, Helen called me into her office. You've been here 6 months, she said, pouring tea. And you've exceeded every expectation. I've watched you. You don't just see loopholes. You see people. You don't just solve problems. You prevent them. I felt something stir in my chest. That quiet, almost forgotten feeling of being seen. Which is why, she continued, I'd like to offer you something. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a title, Director of Ethics and Post-Crisis Strategy. You've lived what most of our clients only fear, she said. That makes you more than a lawyer. It makes you a guide. My hands didn't shake when I picked up the folder. I just smiled. And whispered to myself, it's time. The day I officially accepted the director role at McAdams and Wren, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post about it. I didn't even tell many people, not out of shame, but because I didn't need validation anymore. I walked into the office that morning in an olive green suit, low heels, and confidence that came from within. Confidence that had been earned, not gifted, not borrowed. It was the kind of quiet pride that doesn't shout to be seen. No one looked at me as someone's ex. They looked at me like a woman who belonged. And I did. In my first month as director, I led a full-scale recovery strategy for a tech firm rocked by a whistleblower scandal. Their CEO sat across from me in a tense conference room, arms crossed, reputation unraveling, and said, You really think you can fix this? I had looked him dead in the eyes and said, Not only can I fix it. I can show you how to never need fixing again. And I meant it. Because I knew how systems failed, from boardrooms and bedrooms alike. I knew how trust could be used like currency and how silence could become a weapon. I knew how a woman's voice could be dismissed until it echoed through the right rooms with consequence. At night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Willamette River, the same breeze always finding its way through my lavender plants, now blooming again. I wrote in my journal. Just 1 page a night. Just one truth at a time. One night I wrote. He didn't break me. He bent me into something sharper. Stronger. And now I move through the world not afraid of being alone, but unwilling to be used. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was clear. Ethan sent one final message. This time, there was no romance in it. No desperation. Just a line that said, "You were always more than I deserved. I just didn't see it until you were gone." I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't owe him access to the woman I had become. And Madison? Last I heard, she'd moved back to her hometown, trying to rebrand her career as a consultant. Her LinkedIn disappeared. Her name fell off industry mailing lists. She became what she once tried to turn me into, invisible. But I didn't take joy in that. Because my revenge was never about destroying them. It was about rebuilding me. Lena and I stayed in touch. She was thriving at the nonprofit, now training new volunteers and mentoring survivors of toxic work environments. She sent me a voice note one night. "Thank you. Because of you, I learned that keeping quiet protects the wrong people." I cried when I heard it. Not because I was sad, but because it meant something. Something real. In the spring, I joined a small book club at the public library. We didn't talk about trauma, or power, or fraud. We talked about characters, about growth, about flawed people trying to find meaning in chaos. And sometimes, when I spoke, someone would pause and say, "That's a really beautiful way of putting it." And I'd smile. Because my voice wasn't a tool anymore. It was a truth. One I owned completely. I wasn't planning to fall in love again. But I was open. Open to conversations. Open to connection. Open to laughter that didn't come with conditions. And for now, that was enough. One afternoon, I passed a woman on the street yelling into her phone. Her voice cracked under the weight of trying to stay composed. I didn't know her, but I knew that look. That voice. That breaking. She caught my eye for a split second. And I nodded. A small, silent message, "You'll get through this." Because I had. Because I knew what it meant to start over when no one clapped for you. Because I knew the quiet grace of surviving something that once tried to erase you. And on the first anniversary of my divorce, I didn't mark it with bitterness. I marked it by writing a single sentence in my notebook. Today, I no longer live in anyone's shadow, not even my own. Melissa's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about how clarity, courage, and quiet truth can outlast any lie. It's a reminder that we don't need to scream to be heard, we just need to stand. And when we do, justice follows. Have you ever been underestimated, silenced, or stolen from only to rise stronger? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories about truth, dignity, and second chances.